Welcome back to the panel discussion, Government and Robotics, the shift from low value to high value work, sponsored by UiPath on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Justin Herman, the Emerging Citizen Technology Office Lead at the General Services Administration, Adam Goldberg, the Executive Architect in the Office of Financial Innovation and Transformation at the Treasury Department, Harrison Smith, the Acting Chief Procurement Officer for the IRS, and Jim Walker, the Director of Public Sector Marketing for UiPath. Toward the end of that segment, we started to discuss a little bit about security, and it came up just kind of peripherally. So let's jump into it maybe a little deeper. Jim, as you guys are working with your clients, and as Justin said, security has to be among the first things that's talked to. What are you hearing? Is the security piece, again, the hardest part of any new technology, or is it easier because in some ways the bots are doing as they're told versus having access to all kinds of databases and data and outside internet and all the things that we commonly worry about?
Right. Well, the value that each agency is going through with their proof of concepts or their pilots is that they're getting an opportunity to see exactly that. The promise of it's not going to do anything bad is just a promise. And until an agency sees it and realizes that it's only doing and automating what you were doing manually, any access that the bot has is access that Mark or Mary have today. If they can do something bad, the bot can't, right? Because they can stop in midstream of a process and do something different. That bot's going to execute from one end to the other. But the other thing that we're seeing is that real pathfinders amongst the government agencies right now are looking for ways to securely use their robotics. In the case of NASA, they decided to issue CAT cards for George Washington and John Adams. Right? And they monitor that. In the case of some Department of Defense organizations, they keep all of their robotics within their own network. So they don't need that access to access distant systems, and they're able to apply different security requirements to those and are able to use them. So while the 1823 memo from OMB said use robotic process automation, they have not come out yet with the suggestion on how to use it securely. True leaders and thought leaders out there that are trying to make it work are looking for ways to securely make it work.
And I imagine as you talk to your customers, it's case by case. It's how the Chief Information Officer, how the Chief Information Security Officer, how the program people feel. And they may say, yeah, we need more security because this data is PII or this data is sensitive. It could be, you know, if it's general ledger data versus if it's procurement data where they're just grabbing the sam.gov number or something. Is that the conversation?
Yeah, or a beautiful example is, you think of any CFO's office, they're used to this idea of segregation of duties. And two people are doing an activity because if one person does it, there could be collusion and problems and this type of thing. Well, many agencies are saying, let's buy two bots to make sure we have a segregation of duties, when there's actually no technical way for the one bot to collude with itself, right? It only executes a stream, and when it's done with that, it executes the other one. But because of, as Harrison said earlier, the cost of doing this business is so much cheaper than other things we've done, buying that second bot so that people just feel comfortable is worth that investment to just help them get on board with, we should be doing more automation because we want to deliver better services.
Now, we don't have a CIO or even a CISO on our panel, so it's kind of refreshing in some ways, but so I won't get into the technical, I won't ask you too many technical questions, but how are you guys at the IRS dealing with the security piece? What was the discussions have been around bots?
Well, I think the beauty of what the CIO really worked with us on here was the fact that, hey, we're not entirely sure, because this is the first time I mentioned we're in the nascent stages, really identifying, hey, this is what we need to pay attention to. This is how we're going to work, perhaps a credentialing or perhaps not. Biting off a very, very small portion of that elephant and saying, let's test this now, let's test this incrementally, almost in an agile approach, and find out what it is that we don't know, right? Find out what we need to pay attention to and engage the CISO and engage these folks. And so what we were able to do from a procurement standpoint is buy it fairly quickly. Not fairly, we bought it really quickly. From solicitation to award was 10 days. It's a commercial item, we should be able to move quickly on this, and we were able to do so. But creating an environment where we can talk to the folks, the end customer, the user, the CISO, the CIO, whoever the stakeholders are, in almost a microcosm before we expand it and build it out. So that's what we were pursued.
And Adam, from the Bureau of Fiscal Services perspective, as you guys got the bots together, what was the security conversation like, just generally speaking?
Sure. To your point, I'll stay away from anything about like 1.27 gigawatts.
Thank you. Please stay away from it.
So the first thing, as I said earlier, there were really two paths that we were going down. Path one was the IT path. Path two was the human capital path. And on the IT path, we first had to understand what or whether there were any implications of bringing that software into our test environment. And that was really stage one. And what did it take to make that happen? And we worked very closely with our IT organization because it's not a technology that they were familiar with working with in the past, so they also had to learn it to make sure they understood what was going on. Then we had to understand what are the requirements in terms of credentialing that bot, and I had to make sure that I got credentials for it. I don't think it takes any less time to credential a bot than it takes to credential a person, so I'm still limited by that time. And so we were working through some of those technical issues in our test environment in the first part. Now we're moving the bots into production. So that requires an additional level of scrutiny that needs to occur because any risks are much greater in our production environment than they are in our test environment. And this is something that we're working very closely with our Chief Information Security Officer on. We have to go through the appropriate security impact assessments to make sure that there is no risk or challenge that's raised by going into that final environment.
So, on any PIV card or credential card that you see, you all have pictures on yours. Does the bot have a picture?
I can't disclose that.
You can't disclose that. That'd be awesome if you could.
Neither confirm nor deny.
Confirm or deny the picture.
So
Jim.
Jason, it's something that makes unique in the public sector, especially in federal, is you can't talk about RPA without your CIO. Right? You guarantee yourself failure if you don't integrate your CIO on early. Now you've got to make sure you help your CIO not to say no, but the CIO, because of FISMA, has a requirement to build you a server, to check the network on that, to do the security scans for it. But the CIO is not required to do the building of the process and to determine when you want to change your process and use that for your line of business. And so a true partnership is required here like it's never been required before, because you can have your CFO train their own staff to build their own processes, to automate themselves, but they can't do it unless the CIO provides them this legally required software and hardware platform to do it on.
Justin, one of the things about this whole process and the security piece, but it goes even broader than that, is what does it mean to the workforce? Yeah. Because it's not just, as Jim was saying, you got to bring in the CIO and the CISO world, but it's really the bigger impact. And I think Harrison said it earlier, you have to show it's not being done to you, but done with you. Yes. So talk a little about what GSA's experience, whether with the CFO's office or what you're seeing from agency customers around this idea of the reskilling, what it means to the workforce.
Yeah, this is actually one of the ways that just, again, blows me away on what CFO has been doing at GSA is the reskilling and the training. Because it's one thing to say, okay, there's RPA, we want to just swipe our cards, buy everything. They specifically focused on reskilling and making sure that people in the process itself are empowered to be able to understand and operate these bots. And that's part of like a larger ongoing education effort. And like I said, Ed Burrows, who's over there, and we talk often on this, always explains just how, again, the level of excitement and empowerment that's coming from the workforce, where at first people, again, might be intimidated. And it's easy in technology when you're a program manager who's non-technical to be intimidated by all these new solutions coming to the table. And that's why, in order to see it successful, like NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal said, don't fake the funk on a nasty dunk. Don't go halfway on this in any way. You start with the CIO shop. You start with approaching your workforce and empowering them on it. And then once you bring that together, then you have a great chance. Not 100% sure of it working, because again, you test it, maybe you have to pull the plug. But you're giving yourself the absolute best opportunity to really bring people together and, again, focus on process improvement itself.
And I think the key part here is bringing the people together. And Harrison, maybe talk through us a little bit, as you guys brought it to the workforce and brought it to the procurement shop. Were there some naysayers? What was the reaction from the workforce? And hey, we'll no longer have to do these 8 database type in numbers over and over again.
The response from the team has really been incredible. I mean, as soon as they've started to understand, wait, so you mean that I don't have to do those set of processes anymore and I still get the same outcome? They're amazed by that, they're excited by that. From the IRS perspective, the shift into Q4 spending has been pretty bad over the past couple of years, something that we're working on. But over the past 5 years, we've doubled the percentage of obligations that has happened in September. We went from 13% to about 25%. So again, going back to the first comment that I made is we can't expect to do the same set of actions in the same way with less time and fewer people and have the same outcome. It's really not something that we work on. And what we talk about within the procurement team is the concept of procurement as CX. And I think how you dovetail really quickly out of the low value to high value add work, but also the cap goal on customer engagement and customer experience. When you start to have a mindset that says, hey, let me find out why I'm taking this transaction, why I'm doing these actions that Adam and Justin were talking about earlier. RPA is the enabling technology. It's the mindset, it's the workforce behind that mindset that really drives it. We took a situation where we got rid of 800 pages of procurement policy over the course of a year. 800 pages is a lot to begin with, but when you understand that that's 84% of our procurement policy, that's really impressive. That's really impressive what folks have been able to do. And again, if you go back to the experts on the process, you say, hey, how can we make your life easier? How can we make you more efficient? Virtually everybody is going to say, you're trying to make my life easier. You're trying to make my life more consistent. Awesome. How can I get on board?
It's a great number, 84%.
84%.
We're going to follow up with you on that another time.
Yes, sir.
Jim, talk maybe about the workforce side of this as well. How do you get people ensure that there's not this resistance, and what's the incentive beyond, what we always hear, save money, efficiency and effectiveness?
Yes. So if I'm an employee out there today and listening in a webinar, I'm listening on a webinar, I've got my iPhone going, I'm trying to do my emails, I know I've got work to get done, and I'm not focused on any one thing. But if I know that sitting back in my office, a bot is doing those 99 things for me repetitively, and it's going to have the one thing I need, or that a report is being generated from the quarterly financial transactions, and so I get in first thing in the morning and look at it and see an outlier, and I'm picking up the phone and calling somebody saying, what's this outlier? So that we can speed through the process of understanding our budget. These are things you can't do today because you're busy doing robotic work.
Adam, talk maybe a little bit about how RPA, for at least the Bureau of Fiscal Service and Treasury more broadly, is setting up for the longer term. There's always, you don't move to cloud for cloud's sake, you don't implement technology for technology's sake, but what's RPA meaning for you guys, over, 3 to 5 years from now, if you will?
Sure. We're really at the beginning of our journey, so just going into production now, but I would say even though we haven't gotten our full start, there's more demand for what people want to do in robotics than there is supply with our organization at the moment. There's also the question as to how we want to implement a robotics program. Do I want to do it as an enterprise, or do I want to do it by each individual stovepipe in the organization kind of starting up its own robots? So there's a lot of consideration that we need to take into moving forward. But I think one thing is clear is that from the employee standpoint, we've couched it, we've approached it in a way that they see the robotics as a new opportunity for them, whether in the digital world or a new opportunity in terms of career advancement. And I think that's really something that's important in the long term, is that the workforce understands that there are new opportunities for them that are different from what they're being asked to do today.
Is that refreshing a little bit, that there's more demand than supply? People want it, and it's maybe a little frustrating because you can't go as fast as you want, but it's refreshing that there's so much excitement.
Well, typically, my experience in the last 25 years of implementing financial systems, there's usually not that much enthusiasm for implementing a financial system, but there is enthusiasm about robotics, and I think because robotics itself sounds like a sexy term, I think in and of itself, it's something that people are drawn to, and I think that's part of the attraction.
All right. Justin, I'm going to break the glass. No one during this entire conversation has brought up Skynet, so I'm proud of all of you. But talk a little bit about step back from your perspective of GSA's emerging technology side, and what's this mean for the broader government in terms of reaching certain goals and improving customer service, as an example.
Again, so we can take the technology itself out of it. Let's look at what every single government agency is facing right now on the table. We have more that we have to do than ever, and people are going to be asked to do it with less. RPA is just one of the things, when used correctly, that is going to help be an answer for this, and can be. And so that's something, I apologize.
So
Back off of it.
So one thing you talk when used correctly, and I think that's a key point. And Adam brought this up earlier. Not everything's RPA friendly. Are you seeing agencies kind of sometimes coming to GSA asking for help on things that maybe isn't RPA friendly, or is there a trend maybe that you're seeing around kind of what the ask is, or is the education process?
So overall, like a trend that we see is increasing, especially in emerging technologies office. You have people, and it's a good thing, coming to the table with problems that they've always had, but now there's their belief, and sometimes because of artificial intelligence, sometimes because of RPA, you can go down the list of these different technologies. But the exciting trend, and I feel like that's the adjective of the day, which is kind of weird for something that seems like mundane and data service, not data services, but computation and all the mundane things that get automated, but we keep coming back to excitement on it, is that people who are non-technical now feel like there's things out there that they can do to make their jobs better, their missions better, increase not just efficiencies and effectiveness, but increase citizen satisfaction with services themselves directly today, not 3 to 5 years from now or anything like that. Now, what we would say to any agency then, when we're talking to CIO shops, or you're talking to program managers or non-technical senior leaders, legal counsel, anyone down the pike, is that what we need to do is harness that excitement, and again, it's the sound management of this. No one's going from $0 to $5 million investment in RPA in 1 year. And if someone came to the table and said that they were interested in that, that in itself is probably one of the problems. And that's why you see, and we talk about these experiences, people start incrementally, because it's not just introducing a new tech, it's introducing a new way of doing business. But ultimately, we're seeing the movement forward.
All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time. This has been a fascinating conversation. Obviously, we could talk a lot longer. But let me thank my guests for today. You've been listening to the panel discussion, Government and Robotics, the Shift from Low Value to High Value Work, sponsored by UiPath on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I've been your host, Jason Miller. Let me thank my guests for today, Justin Herman, the Emerging Citizen Technology Office Lead at the General Services Administration, Adam Goldberg, the Executive Architect in the Office of Financial Innovation and Transformation at the Treasury Department, Harrison Smith, the Acting Chief Procurement Officer for the IRS, and Jim Walker, the Director of Public Sector Marketing for UiPath. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks very much.
For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search UiPath Robotics.
On behalf of UiPath, thank you for joining us. A link to the archive session will be sent to you shortly. If you requested a training certificate, you will also receive an email with download instructions after the webinar. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.
Do you know why robots are here? So we are free to do the things we love. So we don't spend hours and days and weeks doing one tedious thing after another.
The truth is, this is the ultimate collaboration. Robots do all the boring, backroom stuff, so we don't have to. We can dream big and push ourselves to be our best versions, so that everyone progresses, everyone wins.